Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. This is the Bucky Inspired series, and I'm delighted to have Kirby back. He's a critical part of this adventure. And, last time he recommended Casey House, which turned out to be very good. So I'm really, I'm just delighted that Kirby is involved in this. And today, he's going to be making Synergetics accessible to children. So even you can understand it. Even I can understand it. So we'll go with this. So all right, Kirby, the floor is all yours.
Okay, where I thought I'd start, is with sharing my screen. Let's do that. Okay, Firefox, here we come. So I'm going to start where we left off with Casey House last time. This is his website, and he was showing at this particular point where he links to a bunch of the rest of us, right? Because there's a community here. We should link to he should link to 52 Thinking Ideas. So here's Joe Clinton, and you say Shrikant's got him already queued up for a future meetup here coming right up. And there's me. And honestly, I haven't heard of all these people. I did get to meet Daniel Lopez Perez by way of Zoom on one of the Trim Tab book club meetups. And here's CJ, of course. And one of the great things about being into the Bucky Fuller network is you get to meet all kinds of really, really interesting people. So I'm always thankful for that, if for no other reason. So if you were to click, I've already clicked, but if you were to click under Kirby Urner, one place you would maybe land, the Casey House links, there are three of them, but one of them goes here. And this is going way back. So I'm going to tell the story somewhat chronologically. What I'm going to do is show you how I have been teaching synergetics and including with kids in my audience or co-participants. They're not necessarily that passive. Audience sounds passive, but in any case, I have a long history since the 80s of experimenting and trying to, like Casey's doing, both get my head around the material myself. And they always say the best way to learn something is to teach it. And the web was a new thing in the 90s. I think we just recently, just the other day in April, had the official 30th anniversary of the advent, not of the internet itself, but of the web. The web is only 30 years old. So this is me 30 years ago. You see 95, 98, and every one of my pages is quite a bit different. There's no unifying color or font. And I'm teaching myself HTML and styling and all this. This is all very hand coded, which at the time there wasn't a lot of, canned software. It was all very new. And I was excited. I was excited because I'd been fantasizing about hypertext. There's a book you may have heard of called Computer Lib Dream Machines by Ted Nelson. And you'd read it in one direction, and it was kind of not a staid book, but more of a conventional book on computer science. Then you'd flip it over, and there was another cover on the back, and that was Dream Machines or maybe Computer Lib. Anyway, you could read it the other direction, and it was more radical. And it was all about hypertext and how you could just click on words and go somewhere. And I just knew that was the kind of writing I wanted to do. So ever since the web came along, I've poured all of my writing into it, not as books, but as hypertext documents, because I want the hyperlinks and I want all these embedded pictures. You can imagine how expensive this would be as a photo offset or however they do it now, book, right? Coffee table. I could come out with photo ready, beautiful publication quality stuff out of the box. And this was very positive feedback for myself. Now, I did not do all of these graphics myself, but I did quite a few of them. And one of the first things I taught myself, so I did this one that looks like ping pong balls, the white one. And then underneath, a guy named Richard Hawkins was one of the first kids on the block, let's say, to have a Silicon Graphics really high end rendering machine, and he could send me graphics like this for embedding. And here's what we call the concentric hierarchy, right? So let's see if tetrahedron goes to my volumes page. I think it does. So, oh, see, there's a problem already. Oh, it's going. All right, I'll explain. that I'm treating this whole website as kind of an archaeological dig. It's like I'm not going in here and actively maintaining it. I'm leaving it as it was, kind of in the 90s, as kind of an archaeological museum specimen. So a lot of the external links or even internal links are broken, but they nevertheless, let's see, I can change the URL by hand up here. So that later got subsumed into a WordPress site. And as we roll forward in time, I've had to change the ISP, the internet service provider. So just to jump into Flickr here for a second, let me go to my photo stream. If you have this book or have seen this book anywhere, as soon as it comes up, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to a book cover. At least I think I am. This is taking too long. I'll come back to that. So let's jump around just a little bit in this ancient 1990s website where you can see here I'm presenting the polyhedra. And this is what I consider at the core of Synergetics, is this streamlining of polyhedrons and their related volumes. All these ratios, you could verify these in ordinary math, but you would not start with the tetrahedron of unit edges as being unit volume. That's the strange alien step that Fuller takes and justifies and shows that it can lead to a consistent paradigm, a new way of thinking about third powering that's not cube based. So you don't say 3 cubed, 3 to the third power, it's still 27, but it's a tetrahedron. When you see third power, you don't spontaneously say or think cubed in this world. So it's an alternative paradigm. And I'm not under any illusions, given the momentum and investment and inertia in the math that we already teach and learn. You can't just expect people to jump tracks or turn on a dime or do anything really sudden, but you can introduce this as a parallel track, right? So what I try to do is sort of find ways to fold together what already exists, what pre-exists, and what we're trying to get across. So now I'm jumping forward in time. This is actually pretty recent. You'll see, for example, over the years, I've collected a lot of geometry toys. So one thing, as you've discovered already, you guys have been studying this material and have seen the rich subculture around toys that goes with geometry. And then my friend Sam Lanahan, who's this inventor that's not Sam, here in the Silicon Forest, I'll call it. There's the Silicon Valley in California. That's all we ever hear about. But we've branded ourselves up here in Oregon, Washington, up to Seattle, Bellevue, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard. There's millions of companies that are based here. Intel. We call this the Silicon Forest. And we have our own inventors and invention culture and our own way of connecting institutions. And part of what's led to me having access to various schools and being able to teach synergetic stuff is the way the institutions are connected and the way I got connected to them. So, for example, let's see, that's not the page. I created a little blog post here, which is just going to be for tonight's talk. And I've got all the links that I kind of hope to hit on at some point, maybe not all of them. But this will take us through to the present time and the work that I've done with kids at various cases. So through these institutions that I've come to know inside of the Silicon Forest, I've been able to sort of grow my own little network of interrelated websites and programs where I do get to go out. That was Coding with Kids I was showing a minute ago. Saturday Academy is another one. I've found venues to let me go into like a summer school, like Saturday Academy. It was like a week-long course. It's all elective. The kids want to be there, self-selected. It's at the College of Reed campus. And I called it Martian Math for them, a summer course I did twice, both times at Reed College. Now, for me and nobody else really, in my own sort of private world, I've got Martian math as one of four maths that we call digital math as a whole. And there's supermarket math, which is about, the distribution of food, databases, commerce, energy and commerce. All of these get spelled out as to what they mean. And they kind of cover all of life in their own way. Casino math is risk taking, chance and probability, all that side of math. And I call it casino math partly because an important aspect of our culture out here are the indigenous peoples, the peoples who have been here for thousands of years. And a lot of them are invested in casinos, and a lot of them use that casino money to improve the environment in important ways, which I could talk about. But I'm very respectful of casino math, you could say, and all that it has to teach us. And so Martian math is kind of looking into the future, whereas Neolithic math is looking into the past. And I'll just say a little bit more about Martian math here. It's based around science fiction storyboard. Let's see, where can I find the best way to access this material? Go back one more. Okay, so here's a storyboard. The idea is, so you're teaching this class and you have these kids and you explain to them what you're trying to do. You're trying to introduce some rather alien math that's not currently taught, and it's interesting, but it's different. So how might we do that? And you could tell it as a science fiction story where aliens have come to the Earth and they think different. It's kind of like the movie Contact with Jodie Foster. There's all this cryptic writing. Their math is different. And they're friendly. We're not at war with them all of a sudden. That plot is kind of boring. I mean, we've seen that a million times, but in this case, we're going to work together, the Earthlings and the Martians, and we're going to build a hydroelectric dam. I'm looking for a dumb picture of a dam. This is really poorly drawn. There is a cartoon about Damas, or called the Damas website, where there's something very similar to this used to teach synergetics. I thought of that later, so I'm not as, this is okay, this drawing. But anyway, it shows us dragging concrete out across a canyon. That thing is full of concrete, and they'll gradually add to this wall that's going up and up and will barricade the river. This is how you build a dam across a steep canyon like Glen Canyon or the Hoover Dam or like one of those. And I'm symbolizing that in this science fiction story, and here I am presenting it to the kids. You've got your ETs. They don't have to be from Mars. We don't really believe in Martians. That's okay. We've got these aliens here who think this synergetics way. They have a unit volume tetrahedron. They think about sphere packing all the time. They're just not the rectilinear kind of cube oriented right angle beasts that we are, the Earthlings. We're over here with our XYZ way of thinking, and we need to collaborate. And like, they've got this tetrahedron full of concrete. It's like, well, what's the conversion constant? Kind of like, feet versus meters or something. So we get into that kind of stuff. And the conceit or the trope, or what we can say to the kids, is you're being trained to work with these Martians. So in order for you to understand their civilization well enough to go work on this dam project, we have to train you in the way Martians think. And so here you are, and here we are. And I'm like your Earth trainer, helping you understand the Martian mindset. And that's just kind of a backdrop, right? And I think of how that could be made into cartoon or movies. It's like just that premise alone could serve as the basis for more than just a classroom narrative. But even just there, it's something you can imagine. It's something that I think storytelling is important. So when you're doing your math, I think it's important that you've got a story of some kind, and this is an example of a story. So let's just dive into Martian math. I was going to talk for like half hour, so in about 8 minutes here, I want to go through some of what the Martian math looks like. I'm just trying to find a good entry point. There's a lot of Python programming involved. I want contemporary skills like HTML, CSS. So we've been here already. Let's just, I'm trying to get to a GitHub repository. So this is moving now into the future. So you've seen my 1990s website, which is kind of archaeological. I'm kind of leaving it as is. But now coming forward, like when I go to Reed College and I teach the Saturday Academy course, are we using that website from the 90s or are we using something more recent? We're using something more recent. We're using technology that's called Jupyter Notebooks, and that's spelled Gupyter. There's the Saturday Academy logo. So this would have been a few years ago. And so the thing about Jupyter Notebooks, here's the classroom that we're using. So the kids each get a fancy Mac. Remember, this is Reed College, a very well-endowed college. And I have lots more pictures from here. And I told the kids, this is a prototype class. I'm going to be taking some pictures. I'm kind of like setting the stage for more of this in the future. It's like I thank them for sort of helping me sort of stage this. In a way, it was just kind of like, this is what we could be doing. And you see all these kind of links and so on. Because I've always been into hypertext, everything links to everything else. But let's go to an older version of this course here just for a second. And so here is like a few years before, and I talk about how Martian Math is a kind of just sort of bringing science fiction together with math. Because why? Because the way we brainstorm about the future, you could say tomorrow is science fiction. Everything after this moment is science fiction. It's just how much science versus how much fiction. So I talk about the ratio of science to fiction. And here's kind of a funny picture of an old-fashioned house. Guy's coming home, looks like he's been working hard on Mars or something like that. And so I talk about science fiction and I talk about the literature around going to Mars. I'm not like, there's Elon Musk was not much of a phenomenon at the time I did this course. So I'm not specifically in this course trying to tie into anything more specific than a long tradition of thinking about colonizing Mars and so forth. Except I turn it around. Here we start getting into Bucky Fuller and stuff. Important to know, by the way, that his view of the dome was often as a transparent outer structure inside of which you had more like a house garden combination. And so, but the house inside, the structure would not need to be protected. It could be more like theater props, and you could change your floor plan easily. It'd be like a mobile home layout, but without the need for protection because you've already got that with your dome. And I get into terraforming. Let's skip to that. And here we bring back the history of this area. These are some of the original tribal folks, and this is called Celilo Falls. Is a very major fishing location and geographically central where all the tribes would come and share and stuff. This is like a major part of the Columbia River here. There's another picture of it. And I'm getting across that we are terraforming the Earth. In other words, as humanity, we talk about terraforming Mars, but what we're really doing is terraforming Earth. And here's a postcard view. What they did around the time I was born, like in the 50s, is they built this huge dam. It's called the Dalles Dam. So Celilo Falls is quite deep under there at this point. This is what it looks like today. And hydroelectric power, again, I'm back to my Martian Math storyboard. I want to actually, in addition to phasing in some of this synergetic stuff and the approach to polyhedrons that you get, I want to talk about electricity and AC, DC, long lines. I don't want, even with kids, to just start with, here's a battery and here's a light bulb. That's how we often start with electricity. I like the Sim City approach. Here's a hydroelectric dam. Here's a city. Here's another city. How are they connected? Like, let's start more at the global level. We can work our way down to the battery light bulb picture. But let's talk about Earth and global data. And, I love Google Earth. So when we talk about Mars, we also turn the camera back, you could say, and look at the whole Earth as a planet. And I think that's also an important part of synergetics. Let's see how I'm doing. I'll give myself another 3 minutes or so. We can move to a more of a discussion very soon. But so I work in, okay, Flextegrity. This is that guy, Sam Lanahan, I'm mentioning. Let me just tell briefly, when I came to the Silicon Forest, like I grew up here as a really little kid. Then I had an overseas experience all the way back to college, all the way through to college. And then I went to the East Coast. First time for me to live on the East Coast. I went to Princeton University. Then I went to Jersey City, which, if you know the geography, is right across from Manhattan. Like it's looking at the Statue of Liberty from the back, you could say. And so I lived there for a while. And that's where I started really getting into Bucky Fuller and starting to meet the people too, starting to write to them, starting to reach out. Then when I, much later in the 80s, 85, so that was 81, not that much later, 4 years later, I moved back to Portland and I find out about personalities like Doug Strain. Doug Strain, who you wouldn't have heard of outside of this area, was an industrialist, but he was also a conscientious objector during World War II, which many people were not, right? And he allowed himself to be, as a conscientious objector, subjected to a lot of experiments about how little you could feed someone and still they'd be okay. They had to live in a refrigerator, or basically a container that was cold 8 hours a day, whatever. Anyway, he told us these stories, but that was as a young man. And then as time went on, he got really into electronic measurement, like ohms and, instruments that measure fine quantities. Metrology is called the science of measurement. And he grew up he became the founder of a great industry here, Electroscientific Instruments, it's called. And Doug Strain, he went to Caltech, and that's where he met Linus Pauling. And Linus Pauling is another super big name around here. 2 Nobel Prizes, chemistry and peace. And he was very outspoken about the dangers of nuclear testing, atmospheric testing, what was happening to people, to the environment, to our health. So Pauling and Doug Strain, when Pauling died, Doug Strain made sure that his memory was kept alive by endowing a bunch of institutions, including one called Institute for Science, Engineering and Public Policy, which is where I came in. I joined that institute and got to meet a lot of people, which is how I got to learn about Saturday Academy and give all these classes and pilot projects and all this. Now, this has been going on for decades. So I have a lot of students who, I don't know how much they remember of our fun times together or whatever, but I imagine people around here, there's some level of fluency around the Spucky stuff that you wouldn't find because of the small amount that I've done. But I think there's a lot more to do. And my goal here with all these experiments, and I'm up to this time, like here's from today, stuff I'm working on, similar kind of stuff. My goal is to show how, in principle, it can be done and it's not that hard. In other words, all the curriculum development is there should you wish to take advantage of it. We could bring Synergetics in easily and painlessly because I've been doing it. And I even had a gig recently with a 4-credit 8th grade where I was teaching the official, 4-credit track. And even there, I was able to throw in enough Bucky stuff to keep me happy. So I guess you could say the point of my experiment is to remove all excuses. It's like, well, we can't teach synergetics because I want to see if I can address whatever all those becauses are and say, well, actually, no, we can, it's a no-brainer at this point. Why aren't we all doing more like this? So that's a little polemical ending to my presentation. Now I'm happy to throw it open to more discussion. I'll stop sharing for the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. All right. So thank you. So folks, this is going to be highly interactive. I'm going to get things started. Really, I mean, I love the idea of Martian Math because actually kids like it, and even I think adults. It's because you're saying, look, imagine somebody with a different context, and then you plug in this way of thinking, and then you are forced to say, okay, how do you go between these things, and how can you get into the Martial mind and try to figure out how they think. So I think that's a great way of introducing it. So my question to you is, when you're trying to shake up the way in which people think about geometry, based on the Euclid approach, what are the big things that you run into? Let's look at kids. So the thing I like about kids is that they don't have that much preconceptions, and they are very curious. They are actually open to the world, and you give them something from which they can do things, with which they can do things, they will do it. So tell me about this approach, when you've tried to present this to the kids.
Yeah, well, for a while, like my daughter went to a public school here called Winter Haven, which the way it works in Portland, we have like magnet schools. And if you're into like STEM, Winter Haven was for you. And it's like you're not supposed to discriminate or whatever, but if you're not into STEM, they kind of scare you away. They say things like, well, if you're not good at math, we can't help you or something. I don't know. But she went to that. And so as her dad, I got entree and we did an all sixth grade assembly. And here's a good old tetrahedron. What I did is I cut out or I photocopied many copies of what's called a plane net. You know what I mean? It's a triangle already unfolded. And so you cut it out with scissors and you fold it up on the lines. It's not as hard as origami. And we just use tape. And there's like lots of kids, picture 40 to 50, maybe more kids, their whole sixth grade. And I just said, if you're sitting on this side of the aisle, fold it like outwards, and this side fold it inwards. So you get what are called left-handed and right-handed A modules. And then it takes 24 of those to fold them up like this and tape them all together, and you get a tetrahedron. And it's fun as a workflow just to have kids sort of do something as a group and see the results of their labor. But then in the Bucky world, those A modules are associated with other modules, BEAST. So we have a B module of the same volume. The volume is 1/24th. It's 1/24th of a tetrahedron. We have all these nice fractions and whole numbers that the kids don't realize because they haven't learned it the other way. They're not going to be getting. In other words, they just take it as, okay, this makes sense. I'm not seeing this as in any way a divergence if you get them young enough. If you're talking to high schoolers or something, then you can start to let them in on that this is basically a divergence from, I don't know what you want to say, Greek metaphysics is what I often say, Euclid and so forth, but it's not that different. In other words, what I emphasize about this Martian stuff is, it may be alien, but it's not unintelligible and it's not that different. It's similar enough. Another thing I do with that science fiction and the Martians is we really dive into H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, where the Martians actually attack. And I talk to them about the episode where Orson Welles read it on Halloween on the radio in New York, and people panicked and all this kind of stuff. I take them back through that time, and we talk about Orson Welles, and we talk about movie making, because partly I also want to get into the mode of maybe you want to make a movie. Martian Math, a lot of these kids are learning how to use animation tools. They want to, the older ones especially. And so here's a theme for cartoons also, this Martian Math stuff. Because we are getting into spatial geometry. That's something we don't really do currently. If you look at the desert we call 10th grade right now, geometry is very planar, and there are some polyhedrons, but they're in the back of the book, and chances are you're not going to get to them. So our ability to think spatially and formally trained in that space, it's not until you maybe go to art school or mechanical drawing. We don't teach that anymore. You know, there is CAD and there is all kinds of engineering where you are in 3D, but this helps get you there earlier. When you're doing all the sphere packing and stuff, you're immediately triangular numbers, tetrahedral numbers, both connect to Pascal's triangle. I'm really hitting the right brain, getting you imagining stuff. I like to think a lot earlier than we do right now as per usual. Like, it's much too left brain right now, our geometry. It's or a lot of what we do. I want to wake up your right brain with this stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. So folks, the theme is how do we communicate synergetics? How do we get people to think in this way? So would love all your thoughts, all your comments, all your questions. You know, this is going to be very interactive. So please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Sure, go ahead.
Thanks, Kirby. I very much appreciate this because I think that this is one of the more important topics that we're covering here for a number of reasons. I think Bucky's ability to connect dots and look across disciplines is something that allowed him to make predictions that would be more accurate than, say, somebody like Malthus, or and kind of having the more linear approach to population growth and resources. And I was thinking about this in terms of how does it, when you're teaching this type of thinking to your students, how does it actually impact maybe some of the other top subjects that they're taking, or what they pull in and they use on a more broad scale? Because I think that that's one of the beauties is that you see the connections between the nodes in various disciplines. As once you start to think spherically, you're not solving a problem with just thinking there's one solution to the problem. That's the best way I could say it at the moment.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go back if I might. I'll share a little more screen here. Let's see. Like virology, that's come up a few times. You're saying, like, how does this impact other disciplines, or how does it connect the dots to other disciplines? And let's see. What is life? So, I think Casey showed some stuff like this last time, that nature has this architecture that is very much what we also start to see in synergetics. And here's an icosahedral head of an actual virus, and not the coronavirus, this is a different style of virus. But notice how much it looks like. Let me make it a little smaller. Notice how much this looks like a spaceship coming from another planet, and it looks like these tripods. Now this is a picture from 1906, so well before anybody knew what a virus looked like. But if you remember, the theory or the microbes actually are part of the story in H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, and that what ultimately defeats the Martians, who are actually inside these tripods that are attacking the Earth, what's inside them, the Martians are attacked by Earth viruses, so they die because of viruses. Now, if you go to Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences, here's something that I'm always coming back to when it comes to teaching Python, but also teaching synergetics at the same time. When you put in the sequence 142, 92, whatever, you get what are called the icosahedral numbers. And Casey has a number of slides about this too, that as you grow outward from a nuclear ball, you have these layers of spheres, one after the other. And it turns out that the virus follows that numbering to some degree. There's Bucky Fuller in a couple links here where he talks about, what you do in the integer sequence is you type in any sequence that might be of interest. And if it's in there in the database, you get back this whole page with all these links and stuff. And I'm very proud that I'm actually here, Kirby Urner, Microarchitecture of the Virus. If you click on that, it takes us back into that website that I started at from the 1990s. And here's like, this again is not the coronavirus. This is the nucleocapsid of some viruses are perfect icosahedrons. And you can actually count the number of capsomeres. Now, all this could have been a topic. We just went through a plague. We just went, okay, coronavirus, a little bit different architecture. But imagine if we had been connecting these dots for students and understanding how the expanding cuboctahedral packing relates to icosahedral numbers and all this kind of stuff, right? It's like neglected, missed opportunities is one of my themes. Another thing that happened recently is Massachusetts decided to abandon the Mercator projection in their classrooms and go with something called the Peters projection. And there are all these articles and stuff, but no one took the time to say, wait a minute, here's another projection by a native of Massachusetts, Bucky Fuller. His map also, has some interesting features we could be discussing, but we don't, right? So just to go to the map real quick, grunch.net. This is kind of a homepage, by the way, for I told you that that old site was kind of an archaeological dig. And I know, I was way long ago, I was going to this Flickr, and I wanted to show you, because I've had to move that website around so much that it's not totally the same URL anymore. I've got GrunchNet now. I own GrunchNet, but it used to be Teleport. That was the ISP that I originally did all that work under. And if you've ever seen this book, Everything is Under Control by Robert Anton Wilson. It's an encyclopedia of conspiracies. If you go under the entry under Grunch, because it's alphabetized, you'll see my old Teleport address. And where it did link is to all this synergetic stuff, because Robert Anton Wilson, the author of that book, was quite aware of and quite friendly towards the Bucky conspiracies, you could say. So it's part of, I would say, kind of American literature at this point. But let's see, I was going to drill down in GrunchNet and just talk about the map real quick. So if I go down into Synergetics on the web, it's called. So a WordPress site grew up around it. There's this 1990s archaeological dig. And then they kind of like the buildings that grow up around, how they build modern buildings around a dig. That's a WordPress site. But the Dymaxion map, we didn't spend any time on it when this story came up about public schools switching to the Peters projection. And here is the Peters projection. That looks kind of distorted to me. And look what it does to the poles. The poles don't matter in either of these projections. Mercator and the Peters, they completely distort the poles and destroy their integrity. Whereas in the Fuller projection, you've got nice South Pole the way it should be, and everything looks about the right size. And it's a good map for understanding how air travel works. If you're going from the Atlantic coast to Europe, you don't fly over the Atlantic, you fly over Greenland and all that kind of stuff. So really cool map, studiously avoided. My thesis is that it's not just that we're neglecting Fuller, we're actively suppressing Fuller. It's something that takes energy to do, because the natural thing would be to let this stuff percolate to the surface. But we're actively fighting it. We don't want it. So why is that? That's what I would ask this group, is why are we fighting the Bucky stuff so hard? What's in it for us?
Beautiful. Let's thank you. Let's go with Rupali next. Rupali, go ahead. Give me just a second. Hold on. Yes, go ahead, Rupali.
Well, Kirby, this is amazing. I was scrolling through some of your work on the various sites you highlighted today. So you've done amazing work. I really like your philosophy for education. And I think you've captured it so well that we've gone from various technical advances, and what do people really need is to have an integrated system of their technical skills and communication skills. I think when I work with my students, that is something we work very hard because very hard on developing, because if you can think of ideas but you can't communicate them, then that really doesn't help. And if you can communicate well but can't think of ideas, that doesn't work well. So having that integrated system is very helpful. And I also was really intrigued by the way you said, participating in community, um, and with a presence in cyberspace. So that is different because, yeah, today's children are growing up in cyberspace. I mean, I see so much, whether they're playing games, whether they are chatting with each other as young as fourth, fifth, sixth graders. And so giving them tools to explore these technologies, um, and making it real for them. So with you talked about the spatial understanding of shapes, and what I noticed, so I teach in a Montessori system, so there's a lot of hands-on work, and we have a robust geometry curriculum, map making curriculum. But during COVID, we noticed that uh, when children were not at school and were online, they did lose some of that spatial understanding because everything was two-dimensional for them. And when children have a concrete idea and understanding of the world around them, then they start connecting the dots. I think you mentioned that too while you were saying that if we can have the children connect the dots, then um, they can really soar. So I just think the education system that you've outlined is very dynamic. It allows children to jump from, oh, let's talk about a story, to let's animate it, make it into a movie, and oh no, let me write a poem about it. But look at this, it has this beauty of math and art. That's how education should be. So very nicely done. I just wanted to share my appreciation for your work. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think kind of a front line in this whole education reform battle or movement, or it's always ferment, right? I'm not saying education reform is a new thing that's just like this has been going on forever, but the next wave of it involves, I think, the notion of a personal workspace. Like, how schools have been designed. There's the factory in mind, the whistle blows, the bell rings, everyone goes to their locker, you're herded from room to room. That all made sense. But now that we've had more online experience, I think there's a lot of things you cannot teach except in person. You want to teach cooking, you want to have group activities, sports, all kinds of things need to be done in person together. But when it comes to the kind of math I want kids to play with the ray tracing and using a program called Blender, which is Python, or all these things, you need like a nerd cave. You need like 2 or 3 screens. Maybe one's not enough, more than just a laptop even. And sitting crammed together side by side, no, you want to decorate your nerd cave. It's like adults, we give them a cubicle at least. We don't give kids anything. And it's partly because we think we can't afford it, and we don't see how the school floor plan can work. And I'm saying, yeah, maybe it doesn't. I see a lot of empty commercial properties in New York City. Why can't the kids go there and at least have a cubicle each? Right. So when you're in school, you need more than just a locker and running from room to room. You need a place to keep your stuff, what we'd call a study carrel. And they start to give you that in college, and they certainly give you a dorm room. But then you're thinking, but a lot of kids, when they go home, they don't have a nerd cave. They don't even have their own room. And if you're telling me that you can't even learn the mathematics that should be required unless you have a nerd cave, you're telling me that it's required for kids to have a safe personal space with lots of screens in order for them to have the public school education that they need and deserve. And that's exactly what I'm saying. You cannot solve this without giving every kid a better living standard if they don't have it. You can't meet the requirements. And I think that's threatening to like countries that want to go cheap on kids like this one. You know, they just want to slog them through. They're still making them buy calculators every year. All the math I'm teaching, you got to have a real computer and a screen. But we're kind of cheap there, kind of cheap. The richest country on earth is one of the most ironic jokes I ever hear.
Thank you, Kirby. Next up is going to be Richard, followed by Paul. Richard.
Thanks, Kirby. This is very helpful to get into this mood of how to convince kids to think differently, try things out. I'm just going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that I was introduced to from Fuller's work. One goes to the Dymaxion map, and I was using the Dymaxion map when I spent 6 months in India. And one of the things that was really interesting, because I'm from Calgary and Bombay is pretty much right halfway around the world. So what I was able to do with the map was to say, tell me what direction, this is assuming you can go the way the crow might fly, but tell me the direction to get from Bombay or Mumbai now to Calgary. And you could look at that map and you could end up saying, oh, I've got to fly north from Bombay to the North Pole and then south to Calgary. And it's just almost a perfect arc. And so, all right, they figured that out. And then saying, okay, now if you want to fly from Calgary to Bombay, what direction do you go? And again, what they do is they end up figuring out that, oh my gosh, it's the same direction. I have to fly north and then south. And then it also gets us into the kinds of discussions about, so why do we call that part of the world India, Southeast Asia? Or not Southeast Asia there, but why do we call that part of the world East India or East Indian? And to get people thinking about where did that all come from, and why don't Indian people call themselves Indians? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and we were talking, or before you joined us, we were talking about that kind of terminology. What's West and what's East?
Yeah. And then the one that I can't remember where I got it from, but it was an exercise for kids to give them 13 gumballs and as many toothpicks as you want, and build a structure that would provide independent housing for 20 people. And eventually what they do is they build an icosahedron with the 13th in the middle, and you end up getting 20 little tetrahedral spaces. And I watched an 8-year-old and adults try out that exercise, and the 8-year-old had it done within minutes. and the adults couldn't figure it out. So it's fascinating, the kinds of things that you can do. The other one that I still find interesting, I wonder if you do it in your class, is trying to convince people or give people proof that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And that's when I've tried to take the two triangles, open them up, slide them together to give you your three-dimensional tetrahedron, and then you can count 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 1 + 1 = 4. And so it's just elementary proof of the rhetoric that so often is used by people that says they're holistic when they're not, or at least they are in their head, but not in their practice.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those demos. They're definitely popular. I'm more into pouring beans, like think about Montessori again. I've got this cardboard tetrahedra. I'm looking to, or polyhedra, trying to see if I've got one right here, where I pour beans or, I used to try cornmeal. I actually went to a Montessori school because my daughter was there in preschool. And I tried cornmeal you pour it between polyhedrons. You've got them all sized the way Bucky sized them. Normally we size them, we don't interrelate them at all. Or if we do size them, the edge of the cube becomes the governing edge, and every other polyhedron has to have the cube edge as its edge. We do it a little differently. So we get nice whole number volumes for a lot of shapes. And the way we show that is you fill one polyhedra and pour with like cups, like when you're cooking, you have different, that kind of thing. I think that to me is something that's being missed, and it's being missed for too long. And so for me, I want to turn the clock, I want to turn the lens back and see what was the problem with teaching that? Like, why have we been radio silent for 40 years on this super, super basic, what could be a Montessori kit, but it isn't. And why? I want to know why. Why aren't we teaching this? I think I've shown that it's easy peasy to do, and I've been doing it, no problem. The kids love it. There's no barrier whatsoever. Why are we holding back? That's my question. I can't figure it out. What's our problem?
Wonderful. Folks, anytime anybody wants to pick up on that question and answer it, you're welcome to do that. So we're going to keep rolling through people. You can come, you can put anything on the table, you can answer, respond to anything else that has been said. We're going to go with Paul, followed by Joe. Paul.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kirby. Your whole enlistment of the right brain in this is really along the lines I'm thinking, I'm struggling with. But I want to put, and to your question of, well, where's this pushback coming from? I want to ask the group and you, and just put it on the table, even though I don't know it has one simple answer. Are we trying to promote the teaching of Bucky's whole beautiful mindset that I'm reading about in Critical Path, where he's trying to live by the concepts that are built into the eternally regenerative universe? And that's what we want to be brought out in the world. Or are we trying to show how Euclidean geometry has some limits and there's other ways of thinking? I'm sure that's not quite a fair question, but I still think it's important to decide what we think, because a bunch of ideas of his have been accepted in the world. They're taken for granted now, and then there's a set that haven't by a large group. And so what's our goal is one question. And once we have that goal, I take a very psychological approach. My idea would be use his own ideas to analyze the human resistance to his concepts. Like, what is our consciousness doing? Like, let's build a tetrahedron of consciousness. Let's look at all the faces. Let's use his design science to understand the resistance. And you're on the path. You guys are all on the path to that. I love it. But that's a frame on all of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Great question. Go ahead, Kirby.
Well, I think you're right on. You nailed it. Fuller, we should use his analysis to figure out what the problem is. And I think Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, and you guys have studied that. I mean, this group is especially literate about the Fuller syllabus, but he put his finger on over-specialization. And nobody is in authority, no one's in control. There is nobody who can say, this is super important. Like, I'm nobody, right? I've got my Princeton background and a philosophy major, but I'm just one guy out there saying, hey, whole number volumes, we could be teaching geometry a different way. And that's just a fact that there's that way of teaching. And then you can put Fuller in as an important writer and futurist. Like Critical Path, it's pretty wild. Grunch of Giants, I think, is American literature. And he got a Medal of Freedom. And Synergetics, he wrote with Applewhite. Who's that? Study his life. Fuller, he meets all these people going back in all disciplines. It's like, it's kind of easy to weave him in kind of the way we weave in Edgar Allan Poe, for example, who wrote a metaphysical thing called Eureka, right? And I think as Applewhite and company were getting towards the end of their careers, they were seeing that as kind of the future. It's like Fuller is, you know, his great aunt was Margaret Fuller, a New England transcendentalist lady who was the first female correspondent for the Herald Tribune, who went to Rome and studied the revolution there and married one of the soldiers who was fighting in that. And then coming home, she and her family, they had a baby by then, all went down at sea with like Emerson and Thoreau watching from the shore there to meet the ship. I mean, that's an amazing little story. And that her grandnephew is Bucky Fuller, this world traveling kind of psychedelic futurist who had this other way of thinking about geometry. And now, kids, that was your English class or your American literature class. Later down the hall or in your math class, we'll teach you more about what he did with his polyhedrons and the geodesic dome and stuff. It's like, it's so easy to imagine a curriculum where he's folded in along with all the other stuff we already teach. It's not like, oh, suddenly the big bulldozer Bucky's coming and it's going to like destroy anything. It's more, he's very integral to our history already. What's keeping us from talking about that? And his whole idea of global grids, the kids need access to global data early, that you want to think about the whole earth and not just your little street. Why don't we encourage that? I think because the powers that be actually are kind of threatened by the idea that ordinary people would be thinking at that level. The way the education system was designed is to keep you very narrow and very focused on mind your own business, basically. That's none of your business. Pipelines, electrical grids, you know, but we've become more fluid in spite of the way it's set up, you know, in spite of our education system. We are becoming more fluent, but we got to notice, I think unconsciously almost, that we're just holding ourselves back by refusing in a way to take ourselves seriously, right?
All right, Kirby, I'm going to attempt a direction for the answer to what you're asking. You know, I agree with Paul that you have to go back to Bucky to see what the problem is. Core thing about Bucky is that you have to learn from your own experience. You know, I talked to Joe Clinton today and he says, you know, whenever I teach synergetics, I always have a hands-on thing where people can work with things and see for themselves these patterns. If you look at Montessori, that is the heart of it. You know, I actually converted my apartment into a Montessori classroom when my niece was staying with me. So actually I made all the math materials myself, you know, at home, because it was too expensive to buy it, because there's a design for kids using, you know, 20 kids using it for 10 years. I just needed something temporarily. So I made all of it. And you see the brilliance of it, of the design, so that the child works with things herself and starts to discover a pattern. So one part of it is our view of what child is or what a human being is. Bucky held, or Montessori held, that each individual is an independent being capable of learning, and that impetus to learning comes from inside. And what the teacher does is to create an environment which allows them to learn. Whereas the modern education system is as if the child is a receptacle, a passive being at which you throw things, and they are just kind of passive absorptions, you know, absorbers of ideas. So there is one thing about just the view of human beings. And then continuation of that is this process of actually working with things and seeing things, building things up. So this is exactly the opposite direction of Platonic thinking. This is Aristotelian, or this is ground up, you know, bottom up. kind of building of ideas as opposed to top down. So that's what I would say. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't know. I think when, the fact that we have so much student debt, I just think that students, if they do start connecting the dots a lot more and realize that this more hopeful futurism, not just Bucky, but like there's a whole sort of, I guess you could call it a counterculture that's being actively not given a voice, they're not going to be happy about that because they could have learned all this stuff and they didn't. And so I feel like, is there any excuse for that? And I feel like, why are you paying any student debt now when they withheld all this from you? In other words, I think students are being actively ripped off, that we're not teaching this stuff. It's not like, oh, Bucky's God, we all got to worship Bucky. It's nothing like that. It's just, here's more history. This is what's been happening. It's like new people are coming into the room and we're not filling them in on what's been happening. We're leaving out huge parts of an important story. And I, like Applewhite, always used to kind of fuss about why people get away with this. He was always saying things like, they do this with impunity, talking about how they don't mention Bucky when they write about the virus or something. And when C60 came out, carbon 60, and they called it Buckminster Fullerene, he felt that was like, finally, we're starting to get some recognition, but where are we going to go from here? And he's an important character to research, Applewhite I'm talking about. In other words, I think there's a lot of power on the side of Bucky too, pushing that this would be acceptable material in the schools. But it is radical, I guess. I guess people are afraid. I think fear is the main thing, and over specialization. Nobody has authority to say this is the way we should go, and so we don't. I think we're all in paralysis. I think, that's what's happening mostly. If I had to describe one word about the situation of humanity, I would say semi-paralysis. We watch helplessly because it's not our problem or we can't do anything about it individually. We feel that way. We feel disempowered. And yet here's this whole alternative that we don't spend any time with at all. I mean, even the teachers don't talk about it. Like, forget about, are we going to teach this to the kids? Where's the conversation where we ask ourselves that question? We're having that discussion now. But why is this discussion so esoteric? Like, only place it's being had is here? It seems to me odd.
Thank you, Kirby. I'm going to make a very quick comment, and then it'll be Joe followed by Rupali. Another take on this from Bucky's work is that, Kirby, you are a great pirate, and most of the teachers are local people who have not really traveled much around, and they are holding on to the ways of doing things in their locality. They say, look, I am a geometry teacher. I have been taught to teach geometry this way, and that's it. This is me. Forget about this internet stuff and this and that and all of this, who is this H.G. Wells anyway? And what does that have to do with geometry? It's like this is a whole bunch of local fiefdoms. And then there is a power thing that happens. It says, look, I know. Who are you? You're just a person going all over the place. What do you know? Whereas I know this particular place here. I am doing what is needed to be done. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. Next up is Joe, followed by Rupali. Joe.
Yeah, I want to pick up on something that, Shrikant had actually talked about, is this idea of experience. And, something that we've covered here, there's another systems thinker by the name of Russell Aycock. And there was a very interesting case study that he had at one of his colleagues had done at Case Western University, where they took 60 incoming freshmen and they were told to calculate the throughput or maximize the flow of a of water through a public utility system. And you needed to know differential equations in order to solve this problem. And these were high school kids that were coming into college, and they did not know differential equations yet. But they were given a book, and they were given access to the teacher, and they were told that they could ask questions. And what they did at the end, they actually came up with a solution to the problem. And they tested out of the first 2 years of math at Case Western University. Now, why is this relevant? It's relevant because I think that this is what Martian math is. It's the ability to cultivate a good question. You're thinking of things differently. Or how do you explain this problem to a Martian, to somebody that is completely different? And I think that that's part of this is what you're saying as well, comes back to the idea of give kids a computer, multiple computers if needed, in order to explore things appropriately so that they can let their imaginations go wild. And so I think that the one of the most important things about education that needs to change is that we need to be given the opportunity to come up with our own solutions as opposed to being told what the solution is. And I think that that actually will help us, change fundamentally the educational system. Now, that's just one perspective. I also have some other maybe threads that I could pick up on with as far as your question that you had a little bit earlier about how to maybe go about doing that. But I think that that is one of the most important things is that we need to cultivate an environment where kids can explore, ask questions, and fail as well in that process. So I think all of those are important. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that on the table because I think it very much maps to the idea of Martian math.
Go ahead, Kirby.
I agree. I think I'll share my screen for a sec. Back to the point of necessary skills. It's like a whole nother side to my career and interest is I'm one of those people who does think that we're not in the age of calculators anymore, and that to teach mathematics at the high school level or even 8th grade and above and not have any programming going on, not sort of introducing a computer language, that's a mistake. We need to hybridize math teaching and computer programming into basically one discipline. And I've been pushing this for a long time, and my allies have been the Python people, like Guido van Rossum, the inventor of Python. He's the guy who wrote Computer Programming for Everybody, a proposal to DARPA, where it's like, how do we make driving a car and programming a computer about at the same level as an expectation everyone should program? We need a simple language. Python's it. And they gave him some money. He actually did get that grant, even though he's a Dutch guy. He got it from DARPA to do some work. And so here I am using Python, and there's the A module and the B module, what I was talking about, plane nets. And the 6th graders, they folded these up. And I remember the 6th grade teacher asking me, yeah, but I want to know the dimensions. In other words, he was ready to take it to the next level. That 6th grade teacher was. And there are a lot of teachers that once somebody actually bothers to tell them about this material, they're excited and want to go ahead, but they're not being told about this material. I would guarantee you that 9 out of 10 teachers have never heard that Buckminster Fuller ever did anything with polyhedrons. He was just a dome guy, right? Anyway, building on what Casey was saying last year about Fuller not being into irrational numbers, you could say that, but on the other hand, I specialize in going out rationally, you could say, to as many digits as we want to go, using capabilities that Python does bring to the table. In other words, you don't get to just put up with the calculator's very limited floating point numbers. You can go all out to like 200 or so significant digits and stuff like that. And look at all these square root signs and stuff like that. This idea that Fuller's math is somehow afraid of what we would call irrational numbers. I don't want to give the wrong impression there. So I've got all this Python code, and it's all related to something it's easy to see and easy to hold in your hands and easy to make. So you can have started out second, third grade, hands-on, making polyhedra, discussing their volumes and so on. By the time you get to eighth grade, if you're not using something like a Jupyter notebook and writing code around this kind of geometry, what are you doing? What are you doing instead? What could be better? Like, again, I'm sounding very biased. Like I'm kind of like representing my curriculum, and I'm going like, what? You're not doing this? Are you crazy? This is the bee's knees, right? So I'm obviously boosting what I'm up to, and it sounds like I'm just like a salesman, but I'm not making money from this. I'm just trying to position myself so that I think we can all live more successfully. I mean, I have an investment in this because I think we don't have a lot of good alternatives, really. What's your better idea, if not curriculum reform, right? Who's got a better idea? Any president has a better idea? I want to hear it. I remember George Bush, the senior guy, he wanted to be education president. We're so far from that right now. We don't have anyone who wants to be education anything. They just, I'm a little bit cynical. It's been a long battle, but I feel like we're winning. I feel like the people who are pushing this curriculum are definitely the ones making headway. So I want more people to join us. I'm a recruiter.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. Let's go to Rupali, followed by Jeannie. Folks, would love to hear from all of you. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. Rupali.
Hi, Kirby. I don't know where to begin. I think Shrikant and Paul talked about going back to Bucky. One thing Buckminster Fuller said is that every child is a genius and that every child has that potential to, he said, if I could be this person, anybody can. And I think that's a belief that every teacher needs to have, every adult, even parents need to believe in their children. And when a child is not successful, instead of saying, what are we doing incorrectly? How is it that we are not meeting the child's need? The first question is, what is the learning disability here? Let's label the child. And I think that's a big problem because instead of saying, what is the teaching disability? They're asking, what is the learning disability? So there is a teaching disability. Then the other part is teaching a child to think. So a child can walk, a child will learn to talk, but then you have to teach them how to think, not what to think. I think there's a big difference in traditional settings where children are taught what to think. So by, you talked about the factory model. You want them to believe in a certain way, and that's detrimental to them. Somebody mentioned fear, and I think teaching with fear, whether it's your exams, your grades, or you're not going to do well in life if you don't do this, instead of saying, let's go at it with courage. What do you want? What do you think about this? What worked? What didn't work? That kind of reflection. All right, what kind of a person do you want to become? And, children from 3 years and up can all think about these things. We've seen that over and over. So knowing that one size does not fit all, but in a traditional setting, the whole idea is let's try everybody to conform. So in kindergarten, these children are so creative and excited and full of ideas. By the time they get to third grade, all of that creativity, imagination is kind of beaten out of them. It's rather sad to see, and that's because they want everybody to do the same thing at the same pace. And no, everybody is different and unique. The other part is the teacher's training. So to be able to teach in this manner that you are proposing, a teacher has to be a comprehensivist and has to be able to understand how things are integrated. That, it's not just teaching math, it's not just teaching art, but look, there are patterns here. What can we do from this? Um, the teachers themselves don't know that because they were not taught that way. And uh, occasionally you will have one or two teachers who get it and who will, they, even though they're in a traditional setting or an alternative setting, they will engage their children in this manner, in a comprehensive manner. But because the teachers are also not trained in that manner, I think there's something to look at teacher training. um, and then um, the other part is looking at the earth in a historic perspective. So when teachers teach students, whether they teach science or geography or history, math, whatever, they don't necessarily go to the first principles. They just pick a topic and then they present it as if it just existed. And the child has no bearing of what do you mean about this topic? When did this start? Who was the first person to think about it? Who was the first person to discover it? But there is a rush to get all the curriculum done in a particular time period. And so there's no time for experimentation, there's no time for exploration. And so the teacher says, here is what evaporation is, or here is whatever topic you want to talk about. And then that's what the child learns. And they might just show some kind of a demonstration, but it's not really going back to the first principles. So I think why this form of education, which seems so wonderful and like no-brainer for me, why is it not popular? I think these are some of the reasons. The other part is Buckminster Fuller talks about the gestation period for an idea. And one thing that Maria Montessori observed was that the world is created for an adult. So the human world that we've created is really for an adult, and the child just happens to be in that world. And Maria Montessori is one of the first educator who kind of said, let's make the world for the child and start with the child at the core. So I would say some of these ideas are fairly new. They're only 150 years old compared to thousands of years of teaching children. And things are beginning to change. For example, there are various extracurricular activities, like there's a competition called Odyssey of the Mind, or Destination Imagination, Lego League. All of these, they engage a child in a more comprehensive manner. And so I think that there are changes. Even in the Polytechnic College near us, they train public school teachers to incorporate STEM in a holistic manner, which is more comprehensive than. And they're every year they have at least 6 or 7 public school districts. So that's a good 20, 30 schools that become STEM schools. And then we, on 52 Living Ideas, we had Michael Strong, who came and spoke. He has an alternative method. I'll end with this, that COVID was like an eye-opener for parents, because they actually got to see what the teachers were teaching, because they were teaching online, and many parents were just shocked. And so there are now these models where you have in-person teaching as well as virtual teaching, and there are these platforms where children can learn their concepts virtually and then go to a space where they can try on those concepts in a hands-on manner and kind of not waste their time sitting in front of, a class waiting for everybody to catch up. So I think there was a silver lining in COVID, and I will end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupali. Kirby.
Yeah. I think part of it is we have this picture of high school as for younger kids, but really high school is also kind of code for sort of basic knowledge. Like that's when you learn how to drive a car. There's a lot of things we do at the high school level that I think we need to relearn every so often. So, Bernie Sanders talks about free college, and a lot of countries offer that. I think we need to offer free high school every 10 to 15 years as long as you're alive. You just need to go back to high school every 10 to 15 years. And that doesn't mean crowding into little desks and pretending you're a teenager or anything. It just means it's that basic, the stuff that we need to review. Biology's changed. I remember going to watch when my daughter was learning to drive, and the instructors were addressing the parents of the young drivers, and they said things like, the way you guys learn to drive is changed a little bit now. You keep your headlights on all the time. We keep our side view mirrors further apart than you were probably taught. And for me, that's a metaphor of like how we all, in a quickly moving society like we live in, where the technology is all changing, the way you need to write now is on the web. You need to, like, all these, the way we express ourselves is using the industrial tools that industry uses. You go straight to the web when you publish. You go straight to your phone. You do everything electronically. That takes some training. That takes some understanding. When do you get to sit down and have someone train you how to best use a cell phone? When do you learn how to use a computer? Actually, we're not really teaching that. It's like, here, kid, here's a phone, figure it out. And they do. But it's like, we don't revisit high school again. I think maybe what we really need to be thinking about is how to rescue the adults. I think the kids will be fine, but how do we get to the adults who think they're above high school? Like, I look at Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, and I think these guys don't even have a high school education yet. In my book, they're long overdue, and yet they're trying to run the country, and they're not even up to high school level, in my view. It's crazy.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. I just want to make one comment on what Rupali has said. It's kind of a ghastly image, but what happens is that what the education system does to kids is inside. So the ghastliness of it is not apparent. My favorite way of thinking about it is the Procrustean bed. The legend of Procrustes was that he had this bed, iron bed, and he would get victims and he would fit them. He would fit them in the bed. If they were tall, he would chop off the legs. If they were short, he would stretch them and kill them. Either way, the victim died. I think that's what we are doing. We are saying, this is the bed that you need this living thing to fit in. And in the process of fitting, you kill life. You kill the ability of the child to learn, the enthusiasm of the child to learn. Living things, it's a distinction between living and non-living. We are holding the non-living. The results, the forms, whatever it is that living people have actually made. And we are trying to fit this living thing in that. That's what education system is doing. And that's just murder. It is, because it is happening inside to the child, and it happens over a period of time. You see a child full of life, full of curiosity, go into the education system. And then over the years, it's slow. It is not as dramatic as Procrustes. It is not as gruesome to the eye, but it is actually worse. So thank you, Rupali. Next up is going to be Jeannie, Becky, Joe, and Paul. Jeannie.
Well, I want to say thank you, Rupali, for saying that things are possibly getting better, and I hope that's true. I think, though, Kirby, you answered your own question, and it's fear. But fear is a natural thing. Even a very primitive animal has fear, and the animal will go away from the thing that it's afraid of. And you look at our society, we're, binging on things like, movies and watching sports and things like that. I mean, you see the young kids, you see the age that they turn to this. And it's there's so much fear. We have to deal with that somehow to try to get beyond this. And I mean, maybe the question is more like, why are there, 20 people that are actually, not watching sports or binging on, movies right now? We should be afraid. I mean, there's a lot to be afraid of. And even if we didn't have enough to be afraid of, we could, be afraid of, the crazy things that they keep throwing at us that we shouldn't even be afraid of. I mean, statistically, your chances of this or that, horrible thing happening are very small, but yet we're all terrified to go outside. I mean, you should see the kids in my neighborhood. That's the other thing I wanted to bring up. You're in Oregon. Things are worse out here. It's even worse, so your ideas are beautiful. I mean, I love the whole thing to approach this with the Martians, but I mean, face it, a lot of people are really afraid of the Martians. I mean, honestly, they are. Everything is making us so afraid. And I don't have an answer for it, but I see that, and I think you answered your own question.
I think what Shrikant was saying also, that, we box in and inhibit through maybe inadvertently sometimes. Out here, like you say, things are maybe better in some ways. The public school system out here, around sixth grade, they have a commitment that every kid should get out of town and have like 2 or 3 days in a camp, a rural setting. And if it's not raining, which it probably is, but if it isn't, you have an opportunity to see the night sky. And a lot of kids grow up in an urban setting. It's always too light polluted to ever see the stars in their full glory. So people go through their full life without ever getting to see the night sky. And I think that should be an object or a target for education systems. So let's get all the kids at least a few times out of the city and under the stars where they could see that. And that's a huge commitment. That means building, vast facilities for kids to come out of the cities, maybe do a little farming, maybe spend a little more time out of the cities, and maybe even a little more time. That would be a whole societal commitment that right now we certainly do not have, because, like you say, we're all afraid. Americans are terrified of Chinese and Russians. It's like all these national sovereignty ethnic groups are being pitted against each other in some kind of dysfunctional. It's kind of like people crammed in an elevator. We're going fast in this elevator. There's no way to get out. You don't really want to start a fight. We got to coexist in this kind of crowded planet that we have, and we're afraid to do it. And Fuller was very upbeat about, we have the opportunity, we could do it. There is enough to go around, but people aren't really convinced of that, a lot of them. But then we don't teach it either. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the one optimistic futurist that you have, who also had some interesting input into geometry, had something new to say about the platonics and so on. Since when does that ever happen? It's like you've been handed this opportunity on a golden plate, but no, we're too scared. It's like, wow, but at least it's not all up to, I guess, it doesn't require that the US or the Americans recognize Bucky as worth teaching. This could happen anywhere, right? Maybe it's going to happen in Africa sooner. I don't know. I was in South Africa for a while. I have a lot of hope in that particular matrix. I like that. South Africa. Let's teach Bucky in South Africa. Are you listening out there? Let's do it. Mark Shuttleworth.
Thank you, Kirby. Folks, I'm going to give a chance for people who have not spoken before to go first. So it's going to be Becky, followed by Maurice, Joe, and Paul. Becky.
Thank you for all the sharing. I really appreciate it. So I think there was something that was mentioned earlier about children. And, one of the things that I really appreciate is that, like, with childhood, you don't have the pressure to perform. So you really let your intuition run wild. But at some point with early education, there is that switch from the right hemisphere of focus of just play and holistic understanding to the left. And I think that that we don't switch back. And just the way that the education system has been, it's a lot of just rewarding that left hemisphere kind of thinking. And I mean, we talk about, like, well, everything's timed. Like, exams are all timed, and it's always routine. And for example, it's like, well, if you understand how or why something happens, why do you have to do it over and over again? And I remember getting in trouble with my homework from my parents because I used the calculator to do the rest of my homework after I understood how to do the multiplication once. It's like, why do I have to do it over and over? But it continues that kind of getting locked into the immediate process without that, maybe to the point where you might have understood something initially, but with the reward system of you need to get things done quickly, so that it's just like the why behind things get lost, and everything's in the same context. I want to put something in the chat. This was hopefully that works, but this was like the straw in the box problem that that was on the Regents back in 2003. And so this caused a lot of problems among this state, because people were not used to, the students were not used to trying to calculate the length using the Pythagorean theorem in 3D, because it wasn't really taught to think in 3D. And so I had taken this in 8th grade, and it was interesting. It was so if you just scroll a little bit down, you see the box with the straw. So it goes from one corner to the other, and yeah, there was like a whole like a regrading and back and forth between what was what, because kids were failing, and it was just it was actually really interesting to see how I thought about it during the situation, and it was something that we were not used to, but that abstraction is easy when you're really interested in something and you really understand it through and through. But the problem is that with a lot of the way that things are taught, kids don't move outside of the situation that they're taught, and to question why. And so the problem carries on into college, as you said. It's like maybe they don't really need to go back to college. They just need to really understand high school before putting all that money in. And college was you really make your education is what you make of it, is how I would say it, because I end up cutting school a lot, but still doing well. But because of the way it was taught, it's just like, well, I can learn a lot more not being in class and really questioning and taking my time to think and learn and having someone talk at you, especially when it's mathematics. Because at that point, you're just like, math, it has to be engaging to really understand something so complicated in terms of like theory and stuff. So to have someone just lecture at you is not too helpful. And I completely agree. Our technology has gotten so complicated to really expect kids to be stuck using just calculators is quite a disadvantage. The high school students are capable of so much. They can definitely be programming at a very early age, and a lot of students or even adults don't need to go back to school to do this. They can learn it for free online. There's no cost to it. So just in reimagining that kind of education for adults even. So thank you.
Kirby?
Yeah, I think, we're in an era now where you're always learning. It's not like, the old model is you go to school for X amount of years and then you learn a trade and then you apply that trade. But nowadays, of course, especially if you're in tech, you're always starting over and learning new stuff. I always say, it's 50-50. Whatever job you have, it's 50% doing your job and 50% learning your next job, something like this. The idea that, I think work study, my metaphor, Fuller's metaphor was spaceship Earth. But I think spaceship Earth is a little bit misleading because we're not really going anywhere. We're just spiraling around the sun. The sun's going somewhere. It's going around the galaxy, but it's not like we can just take off. And anyway, I think it's a global university also. This is a global university. And when it's working, it's a mental hospital as well. It's a teaching university / mental hospital. And I think, we're basically in danger of committing suicide. Talk about Ramsey here. Mr. Dr. Ramsey is our suicidologist online right now. But, the whole planet, the species is kind of on the brink. We have these, we call them weapons of mass destruction, but they're actually weapons of mass suicide. And we're kind of like teetering here. And I think because we're kind of mentally screwed up, right? And I think part of it is we don't know if there's a bright future that we could have, that we could claim. And we're kind of confused about that. Anyway, it's hard. The kids get a lot of negative messaging. They go to school and it's like climate change, global warming, you're not going to have a future. It's all messed up. It's polluted. Plastic in the ocean. It's like there's not a lot of good news that we share. We like to share our fears with the kids, right? I think that's partly why they shut down. It's like, oh my God, adult world is not going to be fun at all, and that's too bad. We need to have more fun things happening. Like I think Burning Man's kind of fun, but we need 24/7 all times of the year Burning Man, not so difficult environment, but prototyping, always prototyping shelters of the future, like refugees and refugee camps. That should be a huge business. In a way, we're all refugees. At least the people camping downtown, they're refugees. We don't talk about them that way. We talk about them as homeless, right? But they're refugees. There's refugees all over the world. And that's really something we can address with shelter, new shelter solutions, aerospace sector. That's what Fuller was holding out. We can use our best technology to do civilian stuff instead of creating weapons of mass suicide. What a concept. But I think if we withhold that vision from the kids, then they become more like us, which is a sad fate. To be a 20th, 21st century adult is not that great a thing, I guess.
Thank you, Kirby. Next up is going to be Morris, Joe, Paul, Richard, and Jeannie. Morris.
Yeah, not much else to add outside of, just some personal stuff. So I am in school now. I'm going to graduate school. And it boggles, in some ways, it boggles my mind to realize how inhumane the system actually is. And I mean, it was funny the other day. I'm in a small group of people, and we're talking about, well, I hear one of my fellow students saying how I'm going to specialize in this because I'll make more money this way. And I'm just going, oh God, I mean, there it is. I mean, that just says it all right there. I don't know. I just find myself in these environments. And I mentioned this in a group the other day. It almost seems like in these environments, you have to become materialist in order to survive. And there seems to be a loss of heart in the process. And what I find myself doing is trying to find something counter outside of it to balance that out. So at least for me, I have a leeway of being able to go somewhere. Whereas with I think younger people, they don't I don't think they necessarily have that option. But I've got some wisdom behind me. Anyway, I'm tired. Feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I did want to share that story of the woman saying, "I'm going to specialize in this because I'll make more money that way." And I'm just thinking, Bucky and specialization. It's all over again. So. Anyway, Kirby, always good to hear you share. Always good.
Yeah, glad you could make it tonight, Maurice. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Maurice. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So I'm just going to actually just pivot a little bit, just off of what has been said. I think it's very important talking about this. Why people feel like education is important in the first place. It essentially is to get a job and to make money, and that's okay. But what comes with that is that if you're doing that, you have a fear automatically built in that is going to kill your creativity from day one. And then from that as well is you also have this fear of criticism, of doing something different, because your goal is not necessarily to get educated or to learn. It's to manage yourself towards a particular position. And this ultimately leads to somebody to be less risk averse. And they're going to be risk averse. And I think there's something that's even more important here that is fundamental, that we're not even, we're kind of touching on it, but nobody's really said it, is that we're never taught to ask what it means to live a good life. And I think that that's the most important question that one could be asked, because if you start to think about that, what it really means to live a good life, a meaningful life, then these other fears and criticisms start to go away, in the sense that, you start to think about what's really important. You start to set your values. And some people will be materialists. I mean, I'm not saying that, and I'm not an idealist, and that's fine. But the fact that people never ask themselves like what they truly value in life, I think, causes them to be less creative in whatever endeavor they actually choose. So I think that in a way, what I'm saying is that there's an ethical component. And then I think there are principles that go along with that that need to be taught. I think that that's one important question that we need to ask ourselves in order to find that inner child. And to find our creativity. Anyway, that's just some of my thoughts, is that the big question of what it means to live a good life, I think, is not being asked. And I think that that's really causing us to have anxiety about a lot of other things. And all of a sudden we start managing ourselves to tests and grades, as opposed to, what's a good solution to a problem. So anyway, that's just a thought I had.
Thank you. Kirby, what do you think?
I think there's a real opportunity once people see that there's a big chunk of curriculum that we could jump for. It doesn't have to be within the context of ordinary school. In other words, I think we've established that things happen very slowly. There's not an easy way, and I would agree with this, to just change the curriculum. I used to work at McGraw-Hill for a while, and the momentum there and the inertia there, it's like we live in a system where, first of all, it's based on wood pulp textbooks, big, heavy textbooks in the case of math a lot. So big the kids fall over backwards when they put too much in their backpacks. But why is that? Like when I go to the colleges, a lot of the kids, to save money, they're doing their best to find the electronic copy, and they're reading it on their computer, whatever book's been assigned, right? And I think kids just naturally feel it's kind of dumb the way they're handing out these big, heavy, thick books and killing all these trees when so much of it is going to be electronic anyway. Like math books are more colorful and more interactive when you do them on a Jupyter notebook. What is it with these textbooks? And the old economy is, because it's wood pulp textbooks, we got to print vast amounts of them to make money. Whatever Texas wants, whatever California wants, so goes the rest of the nation, because of the scale, the economics of scale. So we have all this curriculum that's driven by nothing more than big publishing's model of that we have to do everything in a big, thick, heavy book. Whereas we've got YouTube, we've got animations. When I was growing up, before I left the country as a little kid, I was loving Saturday morning for cartoons and stuff. I think we're going to be able to challenge the rank and file education system coming more from the commercial sector. All these businesses that are casting around for things to do, I'm showing them that there's an unexploited niche for them where they can advertise. Basically, the gaming industry can show off better nerd caves and get kids demanding these nerd caves that I think they deserve, right? They're not safe. They go home, they don't have a real place to just be. And school isn't going to provide that. We see that. So we need other institutions to step in, basically tell kids that school maybe isn't that important. Stay home and watch our programming and get a nerd cave and, join up with this company or whatever. I think, fair warning, like in 40 years, there hasn't been much movement. So now we're justified in shutting it down. I think they want to have fear. We can instill that.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. Next up is going to be Marshall. Marshall, go ahead. What's your question? Marshall, would you like to ask the question? Go ahead and unmute and ask the question. Okay, next up is going to be Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I asked the question we've been asking of myself and the people I know here. Why do we drop all the fear and drop all the resistance and embrace Bucky? And I realized a 30-second, like Kirby, for instance, he's got a philosophy major. Then he went into math. So Kirby is an inherent comprehensivist. I studied music and philosophy, and then I thought I was going to be a teacher, and I got a Harvard Grad School of Education degree. Then I got sucked into technology for 20 years. Then I got a master's in mental health counseling. So my point is, then in that master's, I learned about a wonderful person named Marshall Linehan, who founded dialectical behavioral therapy and talks about the key being the dialectic between acceptance and change that goes on in every person. The need to accept what's reality and the need to have change. And this group right here is very much on the change side of things. I propose. We love it. We embrace it. We go searching out for really interesting things. So a course, a part of a curriculum wouldn't be math or biology or science. It would be called, here's the proposed course for Kirby. It's called Martian Mind. And every day he comes in and he says, everything you always knew about X was wrong. Everything you always knew about evolution you're learning over in that other room is wrong. It was backwards. We actually went to apes, not from them. And everything you always learned about geometry is wrong. On another day, it would be everything you learned in biology is wrong. And actually the whole universe is conscious, but it would be sort of like, wear it like a flag. We're trying to open people's minds, have the course be like that. And it's not in any one subject, so it's not going to be as threatening to the curriculum gods. So I thought I'd at least throw one very specific proposal on the table. Thanks.
I think that's an interesting proposal. What I do is not make anything wrong, but, Fuller did use polemics and rhetoric, and I think there is a place for sort of differentiating what you're offering from what other people have. So you want to compete. Another thing we don't do in schools, I think there's this tendency of it's not fair if we don't just all learn the same thing. There's a sense of the way we're going to even the playing field is everybody's going to learn the same thing. But that's kind of monoculture. That's the Procrustean bed that Sri Kant was talking about. If you bet wrong and you teach everybody something that's inferior or mediocre, you put all your eggs in that basket. It would be much easier if we get out from under this publication system based on heavy wood pulp textbooks to let each school kind of compete with the other schools much more, right? And make the faculty a source of curriculum, because what's very frustrating and a lack of creativity comes with the job then. If you're the teacher and all the curriculum is just handed to you, here, teach this, teach that, this is your job, here's this book you're going to use. The school itself does not become the source of its own curriculum materials, but it very much could. It's like we're in the world of technology now where each school could be very place-based, right? Like Winter Haven, where my daughter went, they have this place called Oaks Bottom nearby that goes down to the river, and there's lots of creatures there, and they could study biology. And that was true of that school. And so the school servers, in that case, would have all this stuff that related to that ecosystem. And every school can differentiate. But the other side of the spectrum is, no, we all have to stand and salute the flag at 8:36, and then we all open our textbook to page 17, and all across the country we learn 17, 18, and 19, and then we do these exercises. And that was a goal in like Prussia and France. It's the idea of how we all get the same national identity is we march people through the picture of marching. And definitely I'm not doing that, right? I want to see diversity, and therefore I want to see teachers given more responsibility for what their school teaches. It's up to them much more than we think it is today.
Thank you, Kirby. Next up is going to be Marshall, Richard, Jeannie, and Eleanor. Marshall, go ahead.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to just throw in there that I've been studying the GPT artificial intelligence language models, and I'm going to suggest that you fiddle with them. I think it would be possible to do what's called fine tuning on one of the models, or there's several open source ones, like a GPT-2. You could try to feed Mr. Fuller's books through it in a very deliberate manner, and maybe add your own books and comments and Python code and things like that, and wind up with a Fuller in a box, so to speak, so that whatever you ask it would give it a response from the perspective of Buckminster Fuller, maybe even his vocabulary. I think you could probably add a few vocabulary words to it. So
I
that's
think
an
that's a
option
real good
too.
idea. I think that will happen. I mean, the whole idea of these AI language model things is you can feed them a special corpus. You know, you can try to feed them everything and then make them polyglot and have opinions and feedback on every possible question. But I think in the future, we'll just feed them Shakespeare, or we'll just feed them James Joyce, or a combination, like Fuller and something, right? Let's feed them Synergetics and 5 Fuller books and some other stuff, right? And I think of Synergetics as in the humanities myself. He's using language very differently than we're used to. That's why when you look at my curriculum proposals carefully, you see that I'm really based in the humanities and coming over a bridge into STEM and dabbling around and making a fuss inside the STEM world. And then I retreat back to my fort in the humanities where Bucky lives, right? This gives the humanities people a lot more confidence. We can come storming over the bridge with our James Joyce and our Ezra Pound and our poetry and our Bucky, and we can say, gosh, you guys in STEM have really not been taking advantage of some really interesting geometry that's buried in this humanities stuff here, like in Synergetics. So we're going to teach it anyway. Like, you don't need to wait for math teachers. Just come to your American literature class and learn a bunch of geometry you never knew, because it's part of literature now. We're not going to wait for the math teachers. That's proved a desert, right? Crickets. We don't get any intelligent math conversations going. They don't even talk amongst themselves about whether we should teach this stuff. It's just amazing to me.
Thank you. Kirby, I'm almost tempted to do an experiment, because ChatGPT 4 is pretty good. So you can say, okay, I have this question, answer it based on what Buckminster Fuller would say. You would have one, and then you say, I have this question, same question. Please answer this based on what Buckminster Fuller and Shakespeare would say, combining their style. It does that pretty well, actually.
Yeah. I look forward to those experiments.
Yes.
I do something called quadre coordinates. We've talked a little bit about that, where I have a whole different, not XYZ, but a different coordinate system that I've got all computerized and stuff. And we've asked GPT-3 to talk about quadres. And because that corpus is, I'm sure, very niche, it comes back for pretty believable stuff. It's kind of a lot of nonsense. I have a video about it. I did a YouTube on it. It gave me a good feel for how GPT-3 and 4 sound knowledgeable, but if you really know your stuff, they make stupid mistakes. But that's their goal. They're trying to sound plausibly smart without actually being 100% right. They don't need to be. They just need to fool you.
Yes, the most amusing thing is that now I've started listening to people and say, wait a minute, this sounds like GPT-4. What is going on with you? Thank you. Next up is going to be Richard, followed by Jeannie and Eleanor. Richard.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the idea of going back to high school every 10 years or so. And having spent quite a few years at university level, there's some merit in doing something at the university level too. A lot of students come into the university higher education system with, I think, a built-in bias that there's a town gown gap or there's a theory practice gap. And so they go through the motions to meet all the requirements to get the degree, and then they go out and they practice what, by and large, they came into the university with. And so they lose that opportunity to learn from the 3, 4, 5, whatever number of years it is in the university. And I found that when I finally got students to play with geometric sort of toys in many ways and build some of these models, they would resist on the grounds that this has no practical value. It's just another one of these theory things that you guys in university are trying to teach us. Then when they went out into the field, and my field is social work, and they had to practice, all of a sudden they started coming back and saying, oh my gosh, this model, this framework actually has practical value. And so they pick up on it. But the point that I was getting at around the high school exercise was remembering going to Bucky's 100th birthday celebration in San Diego in '95. And Amy Edmondson did an adult kindergarten session playing with toothpicks and gumdrops and everything. And it made me think that at the beginning of every university school year, every student should go through one of these kindergarten sort of exercises just to warm them up for the continuing semester that's going to follow on. But it would get them into this mood of being able to not fear, but dare to be naive, dare to try something that they started out thinking was kiddish, belongs in grade 1, but then they come out of it and say, my gosh, this was fun as an adult, and I learned something about it, and it frees them up to begin thinking about what they would be doing in their higher education study over the next semester or 2 semesters. Anyway, just a thought. We could take Amy around the whole world. She could present her adult kindergarten class and maybe have a few disciples that could help her out.
Kirby, would you like to add anything? Go ahead.
I won't add anything at the moment. We can go on.
Sure. I just wanted to say to Kirby and to Richard, of the proposal of going to high school every 10 years or university every 3 years. Our approach here at 52 Living Ideas is to go to high school and university and postgraduate every day, every single day. That's our solution to the problem. So next up is going to be Jeannie. Jeannie, go ahead.
Okay, well, I wanted to pick up on what Becky had said about, the free online courses, and so much is available right now. It's really amazing. And, they're free, and I think they're accessible. And I think your stuff, is accessible on the web. And, there's many opportunities beyond what education offers, like the summer school thing. I love that. Or, there's other venues sort of other than the educational thing that can work. And then I wanted to bring up as a question to you, so much has been done with these classes, but what about, workshops, things that can get the kids, moving? And I mean, I don't see really how you do this with computers exactly, and get the kids, active and building things. How do you do that in a education automation way?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of my writing was on this discussion list. I like discussion lists, public archive discussion lists. There's one called EduSig. SIG stands for Special Interest Group. And at the python.org website, there's like 100 discussion lists, and some are kind of moribund, others are active. But EduSig, over the years, I've posted a ton there. And we would talk about this at length. There was a guy, Arthur Siegel, who was very adamant, and I think making a good point, that when you're quite young, you really don't want to just be sitting in front of a computer. You want to be rough and tumble out in the world. You want to be using your whole body, and so on through adulthood. Like overly sedentary is an issue. And this picture of just being in a nerd cave, I'm always drawing that picture, is not healthy all by itself. You know, you need to work out, you need a gym. I'm a big fan of mixed use skyscrapers. I'm thinking of all this free commercial, not free, but unused commercial space in big cities right now. After COVID, a lot of people aren't coming back. And, you know, if we could redesign some of these buildings, you know, they might be more like dorms. They might not be partitioned up into individual apartments so much, but maybe kids can have a cubicle, and on another floor they can have a gym, and on another floor there's shopping, and on another floor there's like working out and yoga and stuff. It's like, I think we need to think about mixed use buildings more, where you just take the elevator to go from work to home or whatever it is. And I'm addressing your question about how do we have a lifestyle that's not just sitting in front of computers. I'm totally on board with that. I'm really into global university work study tracks where you end up doing work on a farm for credit. I'm a big believer in mixing, trying to get credentialing like a PhD or something by means of world travel and doing those kinds of jobs that you need to know about if you're going to be thinking realistically. I also think about truckers a lot. I think about a trucker exchange program where somebody in Texas who's very used to driving in the North American freeway system can trade places basically and go from Istanbul to Tehran or something. Like, they'd have to go apprentice. They don't know the language, but it's kind of like a Peace Corps, but every which way we trade truckers around. But I'm thinking the US, they're so xenophobic. We really need to start this program between some other countries probably. But, you know, wherever we can do it, wherever we can get people to see the world more, I think that's part of how we stay kinetic and how we stay connected, is we come up with a global university program that A, teaches the Bucky stuff, and B, gives people opportunities to travel a lot, because we need to network a lot for sure. There's so few of us.
Thank you. Next up is Eleanor. Eleanor, go ahead.
Oh, I speak so rarely that I even don't know how to unmute myself. It's okay. So ACC truck drivers and people in different countries have different street rules. So it's even dangerous in New York when you have some Uber driver who's coming from a different country and doesn't know what is a zebra stripe. You cannot cross here in New York on a zebra stripe as a pedestrian anymore, because many countries do not respect this rule, you know? So I don't know how you want to trust somebody with 15 tons. Hopefully there's nothing inside, but I don't think it's a great idea. Only if people make new driver's licenses. So back to creativity. Creativity for me personally is like melody. It's like dancing. And some people like to dance, some not. Some people like to exercise, some not. You cannot make everyone exercise or be physical. So how I see it, I get different building blocks at work. And those are kind of like always similar. The tasks are different, but the building blocks are almost the same over the years I learn them and I kind of like reuse them, but I can place them differently. So my creativity is getting 200 PDF pages of client notes and still be creative, even if I have so much to refill, which is almost impossible, but it's possible. If I want to, I can. So compassion and I think everyone can be creative in any circumstances, even if it's rigid and written rules. You can still reinvent yourself. It's unlimited. It's in yourself. Or you can just play upset and stop doing it and excuse yourself that you don't like it. But yeah, so the other point I was making is cubicles. We have a similar concept in Germany with cubes. In Münster, I saw a couple friends of mine who were studying at the university. They rented cubicles, which looked almost like space-like. The walls were out of plastic, and the bathroom was in a living room, and the desk was actually next to your bed. Those were kind of 40 square feet, I guess, around 500 euro rent a month. And well, I mean, it's up to everyone if everyone wants to do sports. Some people just will not and never do, you know. You cannot force them. And even if you say it's healthy for them, they will not. So it's up to people. And people have also different abilities. And some people don't like to act on their own. They like more to dream. Some people like to initiate. So therefore, creativity is maybe not for everyone. Creativity is like being self-efficient. At the same time, finding the place to play your own melody. But sometimes people don't want because it's easier. So we also need to leave some space for people who do not want. Otherwise, we drown those.
Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Kirby, what do you think about the about education system and differing abilities, different interests? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that one size fits all doesn't work. And, you know, as a student, as a global university student, I want a menu, I want a lot of options going forward. I want to be able to pick and choose like that. You know, I'd like to get into truck driving. I'm pretty old for it, but I would just, you know, actually, I want to be, well, it's a long story. I want to help with that project, though. I have various schemes, and I am connected to a truck company here, and there's things I might get to do personally. But it's not really just about me, of course. I'm really into movie making too, and that I think if we do create some like Burning Man style refugee camps, which use prototypes. When I say Burning Man style, I mean we're testing stuff. So let's say we create a large test camp where people come in for academic credit and they get to live there. They may be homeless. It's kind of like a nomad city, right? We don't want it to be a coercive place where you had to go there. We want journalists to come. We want people to see what's working, what's not. And we want to make media. We want to make movies. In other words, if we do anything interesting with these new technologies, as far as shelter and so on, we're going to have to make it transparent. We're going to have to, people are going to watch and see if they want to be a part of it. And so the skill of making movies, but that's what's happening. The democratic access to technology is what Fuller celebrated. Like now we pretty much all have cell phones, and those are also movie cameras. It's like the barriers to entry to have a world readable website where anyone in the whole world can read your website. We didn't have that 30 years ago, and now we have it. So I think the trend we want to continue as we go forward is what has democratized, given more people more power, even the playing field, as we say, right? I want to keep going in those directions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirby. This was great. I really like the way you set it up. You did a very short presentation and it generated just amazing questions and amazing comments.
Yeah, good discussion.
Wonderful. So folks, I want to tell you what's coming up. Next week, it's going to be a special time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and it's going to be Rupali talking about Montessori's approach to education and comparing it. There are lots of similarities between that and Bucky's approach to education. The week after that, I'm delighted to have Pat Ravasio, who's written the book, The Girl from Spaceship Earth. And she's going to be talking about what life lessons that she learned from Bucky would be useful to everybody. The week after that, I'm delighted to have Joe Clinton here, and he's going to be talking about synergetics as the way in which nature works. So it's, we've got a lot of interesting things coming up. So please come back. And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Kirby. And please connect me to the gentleman that you talked about. And go ahead. I'm going to give you the last words. Please go ahead and say whatever you want to say.
I just want to thank everybody. I really appreciated the feedback, and there's lots to think about. I'm looking forward to the recording, and I have a place set in my blog where I'm going to embed it when it's ready. So let's keep the conversation going. Thank you. Of all the channels, you guys are doing the most on Bucky Fuller these days. So you guys, you deserve the glory and celebration.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirby. Bye, everybody. Great conversation, everybody. Just great comments. Thank you.